Hey, what's up, PFLers? Wow, it's the first time I've ever said that out loud. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different. We are going to be doing a Photochop. And I used to do this a lot, and finally got the craving to do it again. We're going to be making this pretty cool alley scene with this penguin. And now that I think about it, I should have given him a fuzzy purple hat. Probably would have completed this image. Anyhow, you guys can do that. Now that you have an idea of what we're going to be doing, let's go ahead and get started. I have a few images selected that I'm going to be using. These are three of them. You'll see later that I decided I need some more and grab them and drag them to my desktop. I'll have links for all these images just in case you want to try this out and see what your results look like. I'm going to be talking over time-lapse at some parts, and then some parts I'll slow down and kind of explain what I'm doing. Here I'm just setting up the image and bringing it to 1000 pixels so it's easier to see without having to zoom in and everything. The first image I start working with is this penguin, and I'm just getting it ready. I lower the opacity so I can see the background, just so when I scale it, I know how large to make it and where to place it. So I just do a Command T to get the scale tool, holding down Shift to constrain it. I scale it down to size. So once I have it to size, I'm going to grab my vector pen tool and just quickly make a selection around here. I go kind of quickly. You can take your time, but I'm going to go super quickly because I'm going to time-lapse this because it's a little bit slow to watch, but you get the idea. If you're not sure how to use the pen tool, you can check out some of my previous tutorials. Very, very simple, or just try and learn on your own. It's not hard at all. So just make a quick selection around the penguin. Once I was done, I command and clicked the little thumbnail in my layers panel, went up to the top, and by clicking it, it made a quick selection around the shape that I drew. Then at the top, go to select, and then I saved my selection. Really not too necessary, but I did it anyways. And then just named it Pigeon. I was trying to remember how to spell it. Hopefully I did it correctly. Normally I Google hard words like that. So now I felt the penguin had a little bit too much orange on his fur, brown. So I wanted to do a little color correction. So I went to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then went to Levels and chose that checkbox so it only affects the layer right below the adjustment. And then just did some slight curve in this to get rid of some of the brown. Wasn't going too crazy with it because I was going to do more adjustments later on. Just wanted to kind of get rid of that brown color, and it looks a little bit better. I wanted to dirty up the wall a little bit, and I didn't pick out an image before, so I went to my favorite stock website, sxc.hu, and just did a quick search for some wall graffiti. And I drag in the image and then just scale it down with Command T again, and I'm going to mess with perspective a little bit by right clicking, go to perspective, and then I also mess with the distortion to kind of line it up to that wall. I tried to do some different blend modes. I played with that for a while and messed with the color, but wasn't coming out the way that I wanted it to look. Maybe with a different image it would look better, but that's alright. And now the way it looks in the end, I am not very happy with, but I spent just way too long trying to get it to look good that I couldn't delete the layer. It looks alright, but without it, it doesn't really make that big of a difference. So it kind of shows my mindset. Once I work this hard on something, I feel bad just going ahead and deleting it. But yeah, whatever. You learn some new things by trying to mess with it. So now I want to try and make your eyes focus more on the penguin in the center of the road. So to do this, I create a new layer, fill it with black, and then I change the blending mode to overlay, and that's kind of just going to darken all the colors. And then grab my eraser tool and just make it really big and erase the center portion of it, and that gives a really nice looking effect. So now I realize that the image on the brick wall has a lot of white little artifacts on it. It looks kind of noisy, so I went to Filter, Noise, and then Reduce Noise. I tried maxing out most of the settings, but there really wasn't much change. What did the biggest improvement was the checkbox on the bottom that says Remove JPEG Artifacts, and that got rid of quite a lot of the white noise. Here I'm doing just some quick level adjustments. It's not a real big difference, but if you switch back and forth, you can see that it makes the blacks pop out a little bit more, which is what I was after. Now it's time to make this penguin look like he actually belongs in the scene, The best way to do this is to add a shadow. Right now it kind of looks like he's floating and it looks like a horrible Photochop job. So to do this, I just grab a black paintbrush and with my tablet or use your mouse, I just drew out a rough shape of what the penguin looks like. And then once I had the rough shape, I did a filter and then Gaussian blur. And then after that, I grabbed my eraser tool and just erased the back end of the shadow, because that's kind of where it fades off into the distance, I guess you can say. And that gives it a nice realistic look. Now I duplicate the penguin layer. You can do that by Control J. Then go over to Filter, Other, and then High Pass. And here I kind of do a low setting, about 2.5 pixels. And then change the blend mode to overlay, and this is just a nice way to add a really crisp, sharp effect. The brown tint that he has is still kind of bothering me, so I add a new layer adjustment and mess with the exposure settings. And what this does is bring out the whites and makes the blacks more black, so that really helps. After doing this, some parts look kind of blown out of proportion and really white or really too dark. So to fix this, I click on the mask section of the thumbnail, and with a black paintbrush, I just went over certain parts I thought looked bad and fixed it up. So I go over the black parts of the feathers and then the bottom parts of his body just to give it some depth so it doesn't look flat. Alright, fingers off your keyboard and your mouse for a second, and let's
finger disco.
Alright, so let's give little Penny a new ride. We're going to drag and drop this car image right inside there. Going to drag it towards the top of my layers panel. And then just like with the penguin, we're going to use the vector pen tool and just draw around the shape of the car. At the bottom of the car by the cement and the shadow, I just did really sloppy because I wanted to keep some of the cement in the shadow so I wouldn't have to recreate it once we line it up and get it into place. So once again, we're going to command click our shape that we made and then go over to our image and create a new clipping mask, so then it hides out everything except what's selected. And now we can use command T and just scale it to size. This takes a little bit of messing around with just to get into the right place and scale around, so take your time so it doesn't look awkward. I changed the perspective a little bit so then it kind of looks like it's off in the distance rather than just plopped on top. Don't be afraid to take your time and to rotate the image. Do what you have to make it work nicely. Now what I did was lower the opacity so I can see the background a little bit better, and then grabbed a black paintbrush and then just masked out some of the cement and shadows so it blended in better. I'm focusing mainly on this right side right by the railing and the step and trying to get some of the old cement off of that so it looks more three-dimensional. And then I made my brush larger and just feathered out the edges of the entire shadow. That way it kind of blends into the existing cement. Very simple. So now I want to give this car a little bit of depth, and I'm going to do that by quickly creating a layer in the background, and then just like with the penguin, grab a black paintbrush and just paint in a basic shadow. Once that's painted, I can go to filter, blur, and then add a quick Gaussian blur. And that's all there is to it. So I'm going to do the same sharpening technique by going to Other and then High Pass and create a quick high pass layer. I'm going to lower these settings a little bit to 1.7 and then change it to Overlay, and then you can lower the opacity of the sharpness if it's too sharp, and I end up lowering it a little bit more towards the end. Now if you look closely in the back of the car window, you'll see a for sale sign, and that doesn't really match the image I'm going after. This is a very wealthy penguin. He doesn't have to sell anything. So let's just go ahead and zoom in and erase it. I'm just going to use a paintbrush tool and just match some of the colors in the background and quickly brush over it. So now if you look where the for sale sign is, it looks like that whole side section has no windows at all. I kind of want to add some reflections to that. So what I do is just quickly mask around that area with the vector pen tool, and then I'm going to use this as I'm going to make the color black actually, and then use that as a template for creating some gradients. And what I'm doing is using the front windshield as an example of what I'm after. I use a white gradient and then also blue, just so it kind of matches the reflections of the front windshield. Don't forget to lower the opacity of your background images and also your reflective images. That way it kind of looks like a window. You can still see the seats. Now I still feel like the image is a little bit too bright, so I try and darken it by creating a new layer and filling it with black, just like we did before, but by adding another layer it's going to darken it even more. Don't forget to set the blend option to overlay, and then you can just mess with the opacity until you get the correct look. So now I'm going to speed past this part right here. It was me trying to figure out how to darken the back end of the image. It's just way too white and exposed. It kind of ruins the entire image. So I had to figure out something to do to dial that down. Suddenly an idea smacked me, and it was put a brick wall back there. So back to SXC I go, searching around for a brick wall. I just searched around for some grunge looking bricks that kind of match the existing buildings that were already in the image, and I found something that comes pretty close. So after I drag and drop the image into place, I do just like I was doing with the other images. I scale it down and try and get it to about the correct size. I'm holding down shift so it constrains the proportions, and then once I get it into place, I drop down the opacity, and then I started to mask out some parts of the buildings around the side just to make it look like the brick wall actually fits in there, like the downspout and part of the stairs. So to me it doesn't really look right. It feels like this wall is just way too short. It's showing too much of the building in the background, so it just looks wrong. So what I wanted to do was actually build it up. So to do this I went back to the stock photo website and grabbed another brick image. I'm just looking for something that kind of matches the existing brick so I don't have to do too much color correction. But of course it's not going to be 100% perfect, just get the best that you can. Once I dragged it into place and scaled it down, I realized that it was a little bit too short, a little narrow. So I held down Alt and dragged to the side to create a duplicate, and that allows me to stretch it across the entire width of this alleyway. Once it was duplicated, I clicked Command T and then right clicked it and went to flip horizontal, and this helped me line up the edges of the images so they kind of blended together really well. Then I just held down Alt and clicked and dragged the mask from the other brick layer and put that right on top of this new one, and it masked it out perfectly. Now it's time to color correct those new brick layers that we made. What I'm going to do is select both layers by holding down Shift and then Command E, and that's going to combine them all into one layer. And then once we do that, we can go over to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and then go over to Levels, and we're going to mess with the levels a little bit. What I'm trying to do here is make the brick a little bit darker. And once we're done with that, we're going to pop on over to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Curves. And here all we're going to try and do is make the brick a little bit more brown, because right now it's kind of bright red or terracotta, whatever that color is, and we're trying to make it match the top as much as possible. And one issue I was running into is that the grout or the cement in between the bricks was trying to turn green, so you got to watch out for that. One thing I did, which I'm not really sure why, it doesn't make too much of a difference, I guess it kind of helps with the shadows a little bit, is I selected the top brick layer with the TM graffiti on it, and I dragged it down just a little bit, and then changed the blend mode to hue. I think it was a little illusion in my mind. I thought it looked better, but it wasn't too big of a difference. So now I command clicked the background image to create a selection, and then masked out that overlaying image that has the hue blending mode. That way the edges aren't showing. Now to help sell the effect, I grabbed my big black paintbrush and masked away some of the edges to help feather it into place. And if you go a little too far, flip over to white and unmask some of the areas. Like the graffiti, I kind of erased too much, I wanted that sharp. So now if you look to the right of that brick wall that we created, you can see that the building over there is way too white and exposed. And again, I thought that was kind of ruining the look. So I found another brick image that was a little bit taller than it was wide, so it's going to fit inside of that section perfectly. So I smacked that fella into place. Then I used my scale, proportion, and distort tool to try and copy the perspective of that building on the right side. It doesn't have to be 100% perfect, I was just mainly lining it up with the bottom edge of the building, which is closest to the road, because the top just extends up and you're not going to see too much of that. Don't be afraid to lower the opacity or try it out in different blend modes to try and see that background building the best so you can line it up perfectly. Now what I did was create a new layer above that wall layer, and then use the create clipping mask, so it's just whatever we paint is just going to be on that one layer. I used a mid-size soft black brush and then just painted some random shadow styles, and then once I was finished with that, I went to blur and then Gaussian blurred it pretty harsh, and then messed with the blending modes of overlay. I believe I kept some normal but lowered the opacities until it looked correct. Now that the right side is looking acceptable, I wanted to add some shadows to the left as well because it's looking a little bit cut and pasted right there. So again, just used a medium-sized paintbrush. Then I just lowered the opacity of that layer until it matched the brick wall really nicely. Here I just quickly organized my layers a little bit because I was getting a little confused at the length of all the layers and couldn't figure out where to put new stuff. So here I found a cool sky image that I want to use in the background. Now it's purple, but don't worry about that. I don't like it either, and we're going to be changing it. That's the good thing about Photoshop. So I smacked that image into place and scaled it down, and then I moved it around a little bit until I got the correct positioning that I want. I didn't want too much lightning, but I didn't want too little. Then once it was in place, I quickly traced around the buildings that are on either side and created a clipping mask. So here I do some crazy sorcery and change the color of the sky. I do that by going to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and Curve, just like before, and then just messed with all the different colors, the R, G, and the B, red, green, blue. I just played with the curves until I got a nice blue color that I was after. It's a little bit too bright, so I went to the New Adjustment Layer and Exposure, and I made the sky just a little bit darker. So it's kind of like a stormy night. So now all that there's left to do is assign the bottom of it so no one does any funny business and steals little Penny the Penguin and says that she is theirs. Hope you guys enjoyed this tutorial. If you have any questions or comments, be sure to leave them below or send me a PM. If you give this tutorial a try, I would love to see what you guys do. So shoot me a PM with your image. Thanks for watching and see you next time.